It can be a lot of fun exploring what life was like in a different historical time period. Movies do this all the time. Think of The Greatest Showman, which takes you back to New York City in the 19th century, or Enola Holmes, which is set in Victorian London. Or we can go back to medieval times with King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. And if you want to time travel further, Gladiator transports you all the way to ancient Rome, with its epic battles and gladiator fights. But it's not just about the past. Movies can also take you forward in time, to places that don't even exist yet. Think about The Hunger Games, Avatar, or WALL-E. These films imagine a future world. Writing a story that's set in the past or in the future has its challenges, but it's so much fun to do. In today's tutorial, I'll give you some writing tips to help you make your historical story settings feel both authentic and believable. Let's begin by looking at some sentences that I've just written. The crowd showed their displeasure by splattering the gladiator with tomatoes. Sherlock Holmes turned on his table lamp, picked up his magnifying glass, and examined the papers. With his band of merry men sat around the fire, Robin Hood serenaded them with songs on his guitar. Lady Jane excitedly awoke before her alarm clock rang. Today was the day she would marry King Henry VIII. Shakespeare worked frantically, the keys of his typewriter clicking away into the night. What did you think? Did you spot the mistakes? Yes, that's right. I've included things that these characters simply wouldn't have had. Tomatoes didn't reach Europe until the 16th century. Sherlock Holmes would have had a gas lamp, not an electric lamp. Robin Hood would have most probably have had a lute, not a guitar. Lady Jane Seymour wouldn't have had an alarm clock, and William Shakespeare would have used a quill pen, not a typewriter. It's easy to make these kinds of errors because we're so used to modern things being all around us. Just think, only a century ago, most people didn't have electricity. Look around your room right now and imagine which objects wouldn't have existed 100 years ago. When imagining a historic setting, it's important to avoid these kinds of mistakes. Your setting is a huge part of what makes your story feel real. If you get some details wrong, your reader won't feel like they've been transported back in time, and the sense of being in your story's world can quickly be lost. Take a look at this setting description I wrote for a story set in Rome's Colosseum. The Colosseum stood majestically against the azure sky, its grand arches adorned with colourful banners fluttering in the breeze. Crowds of spectators, some sporting sunglasses and wearing t-shirts of the Emperor, streamed into the arena. Jane and Liam were among them, excited to be seeing the gladiators for the first time. Their father was ahead of them, tickets in hand. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The vendors were selling hot dogs and cans of fizzy wine. Music blared from the speakers while they waited. Liam checked his watch, 2:15 p.m. It would be starting soon. Finally, a loud trumpet blast echoed through the Colosseum, signalling the entrance of the two gladiators. It's not a bad setting description, but look how many details I've got wrong. When you're writing about a world you've never lived in, do some research. Find out what life was really like in that time period. Read about the everyday details, and get a feel for how people lived, what they used, and how they thought. It'll make your story much more realistic and engaging. Find out how they dressed, how they travelled, what they ate, what they drank, what activities they did, what names they would have used, how they would have told the time, how they dressed. Sunglasses and t-shirts weren't worn in Roman times. In fact, sunglasses were invented in China about 900 years ago, long after the Roman era. Roman men typically wore togas made of wool, while women wore stolas, long flowing dresses that reached their ankles. Both garments were often belted at the waist. On their feet, Romans usually wore sandals. What they ate. Vendors at the Colosseum didn't sell hot dogs. Instead, they offered flatbreads from baskets, or meat on wooden skewers, such as chicken, pork, or fish. What they drank. Spectators at the Colosseum would have drunk wine, but it wouldn't have been fizzy and was typically watered down. It would have been served in clay or wooden cups. What activities they did. Music wouldn't have blared from speakers at the Colosseum, as this was long before the invention of electricity and modern sound systems. Instead, the sound of trumpets, horns, and drums fill the air, played by musicians. What names they would have used. Instead of Jane and Liam, more fitting Roman names would be Julia and Lucius. Other options for girls' names include Claudia, Livia, Valeria, and Octavia, while suitable names for boys would be Marcus, Titus, Gaius, and Quintus. How they would have told the time. When you go back in history, timekeeping was less precise. Early medieval clocks often didn't have minute hands, as most people only needed to know what hour it was. Before this, people relied on natural indicators of the time of day, including the sun's position and shadow lengths. In Roman times, sundials were commonly used to tell the time of day. Let's use this research to rewrite our Colosseum setting description. The Colosseum stood majestically against the azure sky, its grand arches adorned with colourful banners fluttering in the breeze. Crowds of spectators, mostly wearing simple togas and carrying clay cups, streamed into the arena. Julia and Lucius were among them, excited to witness the gladiators for the first time. Their father was ahead of them, their seat tokens in hand. Inside, the atmosphere was growing. Vendors were selling flatbreads and skewers of meat. As they waited, the sounds of trumpets and drums filled the air. The sun was high in the sky, and the event would be starting soon. Finally, a loud trumpet blast echoed through the Colosseum, signaling the entrance of two gladiators. That's much better. I feel like I've just time travelled. For other great setting description writing tips, make sure you watch this video. And to continue to take your writing to the next level, make sure you subscribe to my channel.